What's up, people viewing by YouTube? My name is Pat, otherwise known as RageRover. In today's YouTube video, I'm basically going to be visiting the Fox Body Mustang that's sitting in my garage. And it's a little project that my father-in-law and I decided to get into it was probably about a year ago or so. But today's video, I'm just basically demoing how I was able to remove all the windshield trim all around the glass on the front of the car without damaging it and without using an actual proper tool to release all of the trim. But anyways, with that out of the way, let's get right into the video and show you how pretty cool, at least I thought, the method that I used was to remove all the trim on the front windshield. Alrighty guys, here it is, the 84 Mustang GT, and doing a little bit of restoration to it. Basically what I'm doing today is I'm just removing all the trim around the windshield, and eventually I'm going to remove the trim around all the rest of the glass around the car. I've already got some of these pieces off, and what a pain in the ass they are, but I tell you what though, they're very secure and you definitely don't want them flying off. So in a way, yeah, it's a pain in the ass to remove, especially if you don't have the removal tool, but nonetheless, it's better to have the trim still attached to the car as opposed to flying off of it. So, but anyways, since I don't actually have the removal tool, I've been improvising, and if I can, I'll improvise as best I can with what I got. But anyways, when it came to removing especially the top piece here, or actually just about all the pieces, I don't have the removal tool, of course, so what I improvised with is a pruning saw. Yeah, it's what I had sitting around, and actually worked pretty well. So basically what I did was, using some of these wood wedges I had sitting around, and honestly you can make them out of like paint stir sticks or whatever you can, or but basically they're soft, they're not going to scratch the glass. But basically I was able to wedge one end of the stick, or my wedge, underneath the trim between it and the glass, and kind of pry up, kind of acting as like a third hand. And then at that point just start hunting for the 5 clips that hold the top piece on, and basically using the very end tooth right there on the saw, I was able to grab a hold of the clip just like so, and actually pull out, and that was enough just to release the trim. And then from that point, as I'm still pulling out, just a little bit of pressure, actually a lot of pressure, because they were pretty well on there. I'm pretty sure they've never been removed since they were installed at the factory. But anyways, using my wedge still in place and this little pry bar, get underneath the trim, get it closer to where the clip is at, and gently prying up. And I didn't want to put the pry bar against the glass, that's just risking shattering it. Just a little bit of pressure, and voila, it actually popped. So I figured I'd give you a little demo, considering I know a lot of people that want to restore the trim or replace the trim on all of these cars don't have access to that tool. You know what, a cheap pruning saw, which honestly you can buy anywhere, probably not the best thing, but you know what, it actually worked pretty well. So let me just give you a little demo rundown of this last piece that I got right here. I mean, I still have this one piece on the cowl, but that simply just pops up, but I'll do that later, considering I have to get this piece off first. So okay, so when it comes to this, basically just taking my wedge here, and yeah, it is definitely smaller on one end. Basically just gently get it up underneath there, and then take my pruning saw and carefully just, if you have to, wear gloves if you can, or if you can find something smaller or something like this, you can actually get up underneath here and actually just start hunting for that clip, which there's a lot of crud that actually builds up underneath this, so if you have to just pry up gently to kind of remove anything, well, we got quite a bit in there. Just try and hunt for that clip as best you can. Eventually you will find it. You just got to take your time, especially when it comes to this, because The stainless, it's real thin. It can actually bend very easily. Luckily, I took my time. It took me a good hour and a half just to do this spot, considering I was doing it with improvised methods, but nonetheless, if you have to, take a flashlight and actually look up in there to see where the clip is. And there it is. So I'll move my wedge back just a little bit, just take your time. Stick this in here. And just kind of hook the tooth onto the clip. It is a little odd at first, but you'll know when it's actually hooked in. And once it is, just kind of have a little bit of pulling out pressure. And here's the other tricky part, especially since I'm kind of wedged up in here. Give a little bit of twist on the saw just to kind of allow a little bit of room, pull out, and then there we go. Starts to pop up. And then you don't want to pull out any more than it already is, because it's already starting to bend. We don't want to bend it anymore, especially when we go to put it back on. Same thing, continue on. You have to just put a little bit of pressure on there, at least to get your saw in there. Yep, there it is. And if you can help it, get as close as possible to the clip with your pry bar or some sort of prying object. You just pull out. Voila. There we go. I'll continue to pull this piece off. When you get closer and closer to the cowl, if you have to, just kind of rotate your saw upwards, at least on the handle end, so that way you're not banging too much on your cowl. Now I did remove the actual cowl cover, but yeah. Again, moving on to the next step here. Hopefully it'll be clip number 3. I believe there's 4 that hold each side on. Try not to clip those back in if you can help it. Once again, we got a lot more crud going on inside of here. So let's pry just a little bit. There you go. Yeah. Okay. Oops, slipped right off of that. Yeah, it does get tricky sometimes. You just might have to take your time and improvise. You don't want to try and pull too hard, but apply enough pressure just to move the tab. If you do end up pulling them out too much, you could bend the tab out way too much, but not to worry, just simply take your thumb and actually push it back on, so that way there's a nice little hairline gap between it and the A-pillar. And I'll show you once I get this piece off, which at this point, I have one more clip to go. Yeah, it is a bit awkward, but once you get it, it's actually relieving. I can actually see these clips real well. And as you pry up on each piece, the gap towards each clip becomes much easier to see if there isn't enough crud in the way. But yep, just kind of be gentle with it. If it doesn't want to go, you might have to try and wiggle your saw around a little bit, or your actual tool. If you actually have a tool, then there's no point in you watching this video. But nonetheless, just the little experience I got here, it worked for me as far as using this saw and just these little methods, and there it is. Okay, when it comes to the actual bottom part where the cowl trim piece and the A-pillar trim piece actually come together, move that out of the way, it just slides up in there. So just simply just grab a hold of your one piece here, grab the other trim piece on the A-pillar, and just simply pull up, and that's it. And then voila, this piece is off, ready to be prepped and painted, or whatever anyone might want to do with it. And as for this bottom piece, all it is it's just simply just clipped on. I'll show you real quick. Okay, so here are the clips that I was actually talking about. And yep, these little clips is all that's really holding the trim onto the body of the car. And occasionally, you see like this one right here, it's got a little bit of a gap. Actually not too bad. It's not, actually I'm not even going to mess with it. But basically, sometimes these tabs can actually be bent further out, like towards the glass more. So real simple, just take your finger or your thumb and actually just kind of bend it back in place. Now I got lucky. These these clips actually are in actually decent shape. None of them are rusty. None of them are cruddy looking. I don't even have a single one that's actually bent out of place. They're all good, so I'm going to reuse them. You can get the actual clips to replace them if you have to, and all I do is just simply pull on and off, because literally the only thing that's holding it on there is like a little rivet stud, but that's really about it. So, but anyways, let's get moving on to removing the last piece. Okay, when it comes to this cowl trim piece, this is the last piece out of all the trim surrounding the windshield. Basically, I just use my wedge and little pry bar, and excuse me, just by simply just put a little bit of pressure here, smaller end, and also too, it gives you a good prying point without damaging your paint. Or if you want to, you can put something softer underneath, but since the paint on this car is kind of already junk, and it is what it is. But just simply gently pry up, kind of support it here with your hand, and as you've noticed, it actually comes up a little bit. So I'm just going to simply remove my wedge down here. I try to avoid prying on the glass, because the less I am on the glass, the less risky I am breaking it. So, yep. And if you do this real gently and careful like, you won't break the tabs off, because literally it's just metal tabs between this cowl plate and the actual windshield glass. So same thing, there's only two tabs that hold these things on. And then, if you have to, just get closer and closer to the clip and pop it off, and that is it. Alrighty, so now all the trim is off this car, and now we can move on to prepping and painting it, but that'll be for another time. Alrighty, so that's all the trim removed off of this windshield, and I'll move on to do other methods to get the rest of the trim off the rest of the car, but now I'm ready for paint. So pretty straightforward. I mean, if you just follow those simple steps with a simple saw like that, it actually works pretty well, as long as the teeth are spaced apart good enough to at least hook onto those clips, like I say. But other than that, that's basically how we do it. So I'm also gonna end up redoing this cowl piece right here. Even though it looks okay, there's actually a bunch of overspray on some spots on the edges and stuff. I mean, to some that might be silly to do stuff like that, but in my opinion, it'll just make the car look that much better. Especially this stuff right here. I mean, that's just ugly. So, but anyways, just a little bit of time. I mean, overall, to get all this trim off, yeah, it took me 2 hours, I guess.
total time, but nonetheless, now I don't have to worry about overspray. I can prep these at my leisure and get them righteous. And once again, I'll just use that trim paint, and I'm sure the final product will look nice. So until next time, we'll see ya.